That's what that flag is right there. All right, only one of these guys won the Nobel Prize. This sounds like a quiz question for next week. A, B, C, D. All right, which one of these guys won the Nobel Prize? Anybody know? They all did enough to win it, but only one of them won it. So there's really a mystery here. Why did only one guy win the Nobel Prize, first of all? And which guy was it?
Lewis.
No, Gibbs and Lewis are good guesses because those guys should have won the darn thing. It was like the least famous guy on this slide. Nernst. Nernst won the Nobel Prize in 1920. All right, now, anybody know why? I mean, not why Nernst won, but why these other guys didn't win. I mean, objectively, they did more than Nernst, and they didn't win it.
Nernst survived to 1941.
The answer is, you know, the way the Nobel Prize works, you do something that's really important, and then it takes a while. There's an induction period while the rest of the world tries to understand what you've done, and then once they understand it, they have to appreciate what you've done, and then once they appreciate it, they've got to get organized and give you the award. Right? And that process typically takes 20 years. Right? When did the Nobel Prizes start? Anybody know? How do you know that? Did you just memorize that? That's an amazing statistic to have on your fingertips. That's the answer. All right, he died in 1896, and he, in his final will and testament, he endowed the Nobel Prize. And the first one was given in 1901, and they don't give it to dead guys. And most of these guys were dead. All right, 1901 is here. All right, in principle, Boltzmann and Lewis could have won it, but by the time everyone understood what they had done, they were dead. All right, Nernst hung on long enough to win the darn thing. What's that? Oh, yeah, this bar is not quite right. Yeah, you're right. There's no good reason why he didn't win the Nobel Prize. It's one of those things where everybody who wins this award deserves it, and then there's another 50 guys who should have won it who never did. Is sort of the way this works, I think. Okay, that's the reason, is the award started here, and then it takes a while, and you know, they only got their act together for you're right, Lewis should have won the darn thing. So this is Gibbs. He's our hero in this whole thing because he's the only American we're going to be talking about, pretty much. C.N. Lewis was an American too, G.N. Lewis rather. But we're not going to, you know, we talk about him a lot when you talk about bonding. Lewis dot structures, that's the guy, right? But we mentioned him at the beginning of the class. Probably you might not remember this, but he got the first PhD in engineering in the whole country. The very first one that was given at Yale was in 1863, right before, or actually right during the Civil War, right? And then, you know, one of the sad realizations you come to if you're an experimentalist is all the guys whose names are attached to equations in chemistry are all theoreticians, pretty much. All right, so Lewis was a theoretician. It's not the people in the lab mixing the chemicals together and plotting the data. It's the theoreticians who sit at their desks and with their pencils and figure stuff out. He was a theoretician. Like Einstein, Dirac, Schrodinger. All right, these guys never did an experiment outside of school. All right, they just looked at other people's experiments and figured them out. So he he had an appointment at Yale. He graduated from Yale, he got appointed there without salary. Right? And this was common at that time. If you hadn't proven yourself as a scholar, it was not uncommon to get hired by a university. You teach, you do all this work, but they wouldn't pay you anything until you started to publish, which was hard to do in those days. Now, you write a paper, it's in your computer. In 10 minutes, you can submit it to a journal electronically. All right, boom, it's a link on your browser opens, there's upload it to the website, it's gone, you're submitted. In those days, you know, everything had to be handwritten manuscripts in triplicate, delivered by horseback to the journal office, which was somewhere on the East Coast. You know, I mean, this process could take years to publish a paper. All right, it's a lot different than it was now. So it wasn't until he got an offer from Hopkins in Baltimore that Yale, which is up in New Haven, Connecticut, said, okay, well, if Hopkins is going to offer you $3,000 a year, we'll give you $2,000, and that was enough for him to stay. And then right after that, he wrote his treatise on the equilibrium of heterogeneous substances. This basically spelled out everything that we think about as thermodynamics these days. He spelled it out in one. You know, these days, one of the standard strategies that we all have as academics is you take some body of data that you've got and you try to carve it up into the smallest publishable unit. So whatever you've done, you can get the most papers out of, right? Because that's how you get promoted in this business. He took everything that he had done and put it into one 300-page paper and published it. It's like the opposite of what we would do today. He's even got a Facebook page. If you write a 300-page paper, you too can have a Facebook page for your paper. So here's his grave. He's buried on the Yale campus because the Yale campus is one of the coolest cemeteries that you've ever seen on it. It's right on the campus. It's called the Grove Street Cemetery. Here it is. All right, here's Grove Street. This is the Yale campus in New Haven. New Haven is a dump. Except for Yale. All right, you've got this beautiful university in this town that is really not so beautiful anymore. Getting better, I guess. Okay, so anybody who wants to can go and look at this cemetery, and the reason you might want to do that is because Gibbs is buried there next to his dad. Here's a map. The cemetery has its own website. You can see the name of everybody who was buried in this cemetery and what they did. It's all people from like the 1800s. It's pretty cool. Noah Webster. Yes, that Webster. Number 16. Right, here's the gate that you go into. It's really, really cool. Huge grave markers like that. So if you're ever in New Haven, Grove Street Cemetery. Okay, so what we've been doing is learning the underpinnings of thermodynamics. That's what statistical mechanics is. Right? It's the underpinnings of thermodynamics. But as chemists, what we really care about is equilibrium, and we haven't said the word yet. Until today, we haven't used the word equilibrium, I don't think, or maybe once or twice. Okay, so we need to get to this because we're ready to be done talking about this whole subject, aren't we? All right, so let's get to the meat of the issue, and then we can put it behind us. Now, oops, my arrow slipped. That's supposed to be up there. So what we're going to try and do today is derive the Gibbs function. And there's going to be a whole bunch of symbols, but I really think it's worth understanding this. So here we go. The system and surrounding. So we talked about this already. There's open systems, closed systems, and isolated systems. Everybody remember that? Isolated systems, no matter or energy can change. Closed systems, energy only. Open, both energy and matter. Most of what we've said so far pertains to isolated systems because they're easier to understand. They're a lot simpler. For isolated systems, we've already derived that the entropy increases, has to increase, all right, for any non-reversible process. If the process is reversible, I'm going to put an equal sign underneath this, greater than or equal to 0. Remember that? Okay, so for an isolated system, entropy increases during a spontaneous process. That's what that means. We'll actually derive this again today. If you're in either one of these two categories, and we virtually always are, all right, if we're actually doing an experiment, we're not in an isolated system. We're either in an open system or a closed system. All right, we have to consider both the system and the surroundings in this non-inequality. In other words, it's the total entropy of the universe that's got to get bigger. All right, and the universe includes the system that you care about and everything else. Okay, so there's two terms in this total entropy. There's the system that you care about and everything outside of it, because your system's in communication with the outside world, either by exchanging matter or by exchanging energy. Okay? So if the system is an isolated entropy, yes. Now, this is the only thing that matters in terms of understanding where something is spontaneous or not. We're going to derive this Gibbs function, but the Gibbs function is going to be derived from this. It's all about entropy. All right, so if you remember nothing else about this lecture, you need to remember that spontaneity of a chemical process is about entropy. And the Gibbs energy is just a way to parameterize in a convenient way the entropy for us. That's all we're doing with the Gibbs function. We're parameterizing the entropy in a convenient way. Okay. So, if this is true, then I can move that guy over to the right-hand side and put a minus sign on him, right? So that has to be true. And we've already said we've got an expression for the entropy in terms of the heat that's transferred and the temperature, and so I can make a substitution for the surroundings. Minus ds here is going to be dq. It's plus dq because there's normally a minus sign that connects this minus dq over t with ds. All right, so if that's minus ds, that's going to be plus dq over t surroundings. Now, q is a conserved quantity. In other words, if plus q enters the system, minus q is removed from the surroundings. Right? If q goes into the system, it had to come from the surroundings. Right? So if it's a plus for the system, it's a minus for the surroundings, right? Okay. So what we've already beaten into the ground is that the du, where you use the internal energy, that equals dw plus dq. That means dq is du minus dw. And so I can just plug this in for dq in this equation right here. Right? du minus dw. And I've got this equation right here. We haven't done anything fancy yet. Everything's very simple. And all I've done here is assume that the only work that's being done is pressure volume work. Okay, so I've got PdV here. Now, let's multiply both sides by T surroundings. When we do that, we're going to get T surroundings on that side. We're going to lose it from the right side, and so here we go. All right, all I did is multiply by D surroundings, so now it's on the left-hand side. It's gone from over here. All right, this doesn't look like our conservation of entropy equations anymore, does it? It's starting to morph. All right, but we're still talking exclusively about entropy here. All right, we've just made substitutions from symbols. This equation is going to keep coming up. We're going to call it the pink equation. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to find convenient expressions for du, plug them into the pink equation, and we're going to find the Gibbs equation, we're going to find the Gibbs energy rather, the Helmholtz energy. Right, that's what we're going to do in the next 10 minutes. All right, we're going to keep coming back to the